Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into an absolutely astonishing true story today. We're going to break down the anatomy of a collapse, specifically looking at how the incredibly powerful Crusader states managed to orchestrate their own dramatic demise. And this isn't just your standard story of an empire being conquered from the outside. No, it's a fascinating, almost unbelievable look at internal divisions, rogue actors, and just catastrophic strategic blunders.
So, here is the central mystery we're trying to unravel. How on earth does an empire that successfully conquered the Holy Land during the First Crusade completely tear itself apart from the inside out in less than a single century? We are going to do a full, forensic breakdown of this self-inflicted collapse. We'll dive into the data, the geography, and quite frankly, the mind-boggling decisions of the leaders who doomed their very own kingdom.
All right, part 1. Forging the Crusader States. To really appreciate how hard they fell, we first need to understand the initial peak of their power.
Right off the bat, after the First Crusade, the territory didn't magically become one big unified nation. Instead, you get 4 distinct Crusader states. Up top, there's the Kingdom of Jerusalem. This was the capital, the crown jewel, initially led by Godfrey of Bouillon and later his brother Baldwin I. Then you've got the Principality of Antioch, which was really known for its aggressive early expansion. Next is the County of Tripoli. It was the smallest, sure, but it had the huge advantage of being heavily protected by the Lebanon Mountains. And finally, the County of Edessa. It was actually the very first state formed, but as we'll see, it was by far the most distant and vulnerable. Now, under early leaders like Baldwin I, these borders expanded incredibly fast. They grabbed key coastal ports like Acre, locked down vital trade routes, and incredibly, even pushed all the way down to the Red Sea, which effectively sliced Muslim Egypt right off from Syria.
But if you look beneath all that rapid expansion and what looked like a booming economy, there were some massive, hidden structural flaws. So part 2, knights, trade, and shortages.
Just think about the sheer discrepancy in manpower here. At their absolute maximum peak, the Kingdom of Jerusalem could scrape together roughly 20,000 soldiers. And out of that, only about 5,000 were heavily armored knights on horseback, the elite shock troops of the era. Now compare that to the eventual unified Muslim army they'd soon face, which contemporary chronicles estimated at a staggering 100,000 soldiers. I mean, that is a severe, constant shortage of manpower that basically haunted the kingdom from day one. It got so bad that even the Patriarch of Jerusalem and local Christian monasteries literally had to dip into their own pockets to hire mercenaries, just to keep the border somewhat secure.
So to help plug this massive military gap, the Crusader states relied heavily on military orders. You've probably heard of the most famous ones, the Knights Templar and the Hospitallers. Now, these guys weren't just groups of praying monks. They functioned as massive, entirely independent states within a state. They were unbelievably wealthy, thanks to a constant stream of donations pouring in from European pilgrims. All that cash allowed them to build and hold massive fortresses, like the legendary Croix de Chevalier, run by the Hospitallers. They were absolutely crucial for defending the Holy Land, but their fierce independence also meant the King of Jerusalem didn't always have full control over his own military forces. And that's a problem.
Yet, despite this constant, looming military threat, daily life in the Crusader states was surprisingly prosperous and really complex. You had Western European lords holding all the political power, while the local populations, the Greeks, Armenians, Assyrians, and Arabs, mostly worked the land as peasants. But it wasn't strictly segregated. There were really high rates of intermarriage between Europeans and local Christian nobility, which actually created a brand new social class known as the Pulans. And perhaps the most surprising part is the experience of the local Muslim community. Yes, they paid a small extra tax, but Arab travelers back then actually noted that Muslim peasants would frequently migrate from war-torn neighboring emirates right into Crusader lands. Why? Simply because life there was more stable and convenient. Combine all of that with a booming trade economy driven by Italian merchants and Arab caravans, and you've got this very wealthy, intertwined society that was completely masking a critically fragile military foundation.
Okay, so how does this prosperous but highly fragile system actually start to break apart? Part 3, the first cracks appear.
The beginning of the end kicks off in the most vulnerable territory of them all, the County of Edessa. In 1144, an ambitious Muslim Atabeg from Mosul named Zengi lays siege to Edessa. Now, logically, you'd think the other Crusader states would instantly rush in to help, right? Nope. The Prince of Antioch actually flat out refused to send reinforcements, all because of a petty recent squabble with Edessa's ruler. Because of one petty squabble, Edessa fell. This sent massive shockwaves through the Christian world, and it's exactly what sparked the infamous Second Crusade.
So the Second Crusade is supposed to swoop in and save the day, but instead it turns into one of the greatest strategic blunders in all of military history. You've got two major European monarchs leading the charge, King Louis VII of France and Emperor Conrad III. They arrive in Acre in 1148, but their military council is an absolute disaster. They can't agree on what to attack, and then, inexplicably, they decide to attack the city of Damascus. Why is this a total catastrophe? Because Damascus was actually the Crusaders' most vital Muslim ally in the region. Yeah, you heard that right. After just 4 days of throwing themselves at the walls and taking heavy losses, they give up, pack it in, and go home in complete disgrace. They achieved zero, and worse, they actively pushed their best allies straight into the waiting arms of a rising new enemy.
And that enemy would eventually unify the entire region against them. Part 4, Saladin and the Leper King.
You can literally see this trap snapping shut over time. We see a rapid succession of highly capable Muslim leaders who just systematically dismantle the Crusaders' geographic advantages. First, Zengi takes Edessa. Then his son, Nur ad-Din, capitalizes on that massive blunder of the Second Crusade to snatch up Damascus. After that, Nur ad-Din's general, Shirkuh, swoops in and successfully conquers Egypt. And finally, Shirkuh's nephew, Saladin, inherits the whole thing. Saladin brilliantly stitches together the territories of Egypt and Syria. So if you look at the map at this point, the Crusader states are completely boxed in, totally surrounded by a single, massive, unified empire fielding an army of 100,000 men. The noose is tight.
But standing directly in the path of this juggernaut is one of history's most tragic, yet heroic figures. King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, famously known as the Leper King. Despite suffering from severe leprosy since he was a kid, a disease that was literally destroying his body, the guy had a truly brilliant military mind. When Saladin invades, totally expecting to just steamroll a weakened king, Baldwin launches this stunning, desperate surprise attack. At the Battle of Montgisard, he outflanks the massive Muslim army and hits them hard from the rear. The Crusaders absolutely decimate Saladin's forces, and Saladin himself only escapes by the skin of his teeth. Against all odds, this teenage king kept his entire kingdom alive through sheer, unyielding force of will.
Tragically, Baldwin IV eventually succumbs to his illness, and without his steady hand, the kingdom just plunges straight into chaos. Part 5, The Fall of Jerusalem.
Honestly, if you ever need a textbook example of how a state destroys itself from within, look no further than Reynaud of Chatillon. He is the ultimate symptom of a wildly broken feudal system where the king simply can't control his own vassals. Reynaud was a total rogue warlord. He literally tortured his own Christian patriarch just to extort cash. He constantly raided Arab merchant caravans, intentionally tearing up vital peace truces. The guy even built ships out in the desert, hauled them to the Red Sea, and tried to sail down and sack Mecca itself. Finally, in 1186, he crosses the point of no return, he attacks the caravan, and actually captures Saladin's own sister. Saladin is absolutely furious. He vows to kill Reynaud with his own hands, immediately raises an army of 40,000 soldiers, and invades.
With Baldwin IV gone, the crown is passed to a disastrously incompetent leader named Guy de Lusignan. Saladin lays siege to the city of Tiberias, essentially dangling bait to draw the Crusaders into a fight. Every single seasoned baron begs King Guy to stay put. They tell him, look, wait behind our strong walls and let Saladin's army burn out in the brutal summer heat. But King Guy ignores every piece of advice. He gathers up the entire military strength of the kingdom and marches his men directly out into the arid, scorching summer desert to face Saladin head-on.
Saladin doesn't just meet them in battle, he engineers their absolute destruction. It is a masterclass in tactics at the Horns of Hattin. First, he lures them even deeper into the desert. Second, he meticulously cuts off their access to every single water source in the area. Third, while the Crusaders are practically baking inside their heavy armor and dying of thirst, Saladin's troops set the surrounding dry scrub brush on fire, choking them with thick smoke. Finally, his fresh forces sweep in and completely crush the exhausted, dangerously dehydrated Crusader army. In a single afternoon, the entire military apparatus of the Kingdom of Jerusalem is wiped off the map. King Guy is taken prisoner, and keeping his promise, Saladin personally executes the rogue Reynaud of Chatillon. So, with literally no army left in the field, the path to Jerusalem is wide open. The desperate defense of the Holy City falls to a knight named Balian of Ibelin. Balian mounts this incredibly heroic final stand, managing to hold off Saladin's massive army for 9 grueling days. But ultimately, the city walls start to give way. Staring total annihilation in the face, Balian manages to negotiate a surrender. Saladin agrees that the Christian inhabitants can basically buy their own freedom and leave the city safely,
for an average ransom of about 10 dinners per person.
But the tragedy doesn't end with a peaceful walk out the gates. While the wealthy easily bought their freedom, roughly 10,000 of the poorer Christians just couldn't afford that 10-dinar ransom. And the bitter irony here is almost hard to stomach. Get this. The Christian patriarch, Heraclius, actually embezzled the church funds that he had explicitly promised to use to ransom those poor citizens. Meanwhile, Saladin, the conquering enemy, voluntarily donated